Selling Yourself, How to Make It All on Your Own. Dre Baldwin, basketballer, author, 4 times TED Talk speaker. The true story of Dre Baldwin, combining the story of Tom Cruise's character Jerry Maguire and Mark Wahlberg's character in the movie Invincible. It was an absolute honor to speak with Dre. He's the only person in 5 years of the show who has ever sent me a personal video invitation. Absolutely mind-blowing. Dre is one of the pioneers of an online business, and he's literally created a bootstrap business from having to sell himself to over 60 sports agents, to being picked up in his first professional basketball team, to having to repitch himself every single year to renew his contract with each team. He now brings this to the business world, and wow, he is good. His insights near the end of the show were mind-blowing. You may have an idea, you may have marketing, but without an exchange of money, you don't have a business. Know what your audience needs and give it to them. That inspired his first ever ebook, and it still sells today. A truly inspirational story in the vein of movies like The Pursuit of Happiness, Billy Elliot, and The True Story of Brian Hennessy, who's been a guest on the show. It's hard to fathom that we listen to the true story of this man's journey. You will love it. You can find Dre at the show notes that you see in the links below. And if you're listening, workonyourgame.com, and on Insta, Dre Baldwin. Thanks for watching. Hi, thanks for watching. I'm Damien Porter, former Special Forces operator, and check out my new project for 2023 at hownottodie.com.au, where I've combined all my Special Forces training and police officer experience to help others. Thanks for watching. And we're live. Welcome to the Straight Talk Mind and Muscle podcast. Welcome to our guest today, Dre Baldwin. Thank you for coming on.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm excited for this conversation.
Look, like I said just before we started recording, the only person to drop my jaw in 2022. I got a video from you. The family came around the computer, and we were watching this video directly from you to me, and I was just blown away. In this world of anonymity, in this world of social media, to get something like that personally direct to yourself, it shows phenomenal authenticity and passion, Dre. So thank you for putting a smile on our faces and hitting our hearts.
Well, I'm glad it caught your attention, and you're welcome. And thank you for inviting me for this conversation on your platform.
Now you're an interesting guy, man. I mean, we're talking about Work on Your Game, the phenomenal project that you're on to now, but you've given 4 TED Talks, you've authored 33 books. Wow, your podcast, over 2,300 episodes. I think, and I did my research back when you sent that video, you had the most content on the internet of any person. Is that right?
Unofficially, yes. I have created more original content, and nobody's put more stuff out than me over the last, from the time that I got online to now. Nobody's put out more stuff than me. Original content.
Brilliant. That's brilliant. And that's probably where we'd jump off, because you weren't doing this. Your original career plan was literally professional basketball. So can you run us through your professional basketball journey, and then what sort of flipped, and how do we end up here? Me talking to an author of 33 books.
Sure. So it started playing ball in 2005.
Mm-hmm.
So I had come out of a Division III college, which here in the States is just the third tier of college sports. So most professional athletes that you see on TV, football, basketball, baseball, every sport, they usually come from the Division I level. So players coming out of Division III usually they're not even ambitious about trying to play pro. They know that their careers are probably going to end after college. But I had this crazy idea that I could keep my career going. So after college, 1 year removed, I went to this event called an exposure camp, which is basically a job fair for athletes where you pay money for the chance to get seen. And I went to that event, and I played pretty well at that event. And I paid $250 in US in cash. at the door, because at the time I didn't even have a bank account or a credit card. So I asked them, could I pay in cash? And they said, yeah, you can bring cash. So I bring cash and paid them at the door. And it was only 2 days. So this event's just 2 days long, and there's 200 guys in there who all think they can play pro basketball. Mm-hmm. So we're all trying to prove ourselves. It's kind of like a casting call for basketball. And the whole audience are just people who are decision makers, coaches, scouts, authors, agents, etc., from around the basketball world. They travel to these events because they're looking for talent. So I played pretty well at that event. Got a good scouting report from the event, but I did not get signed to a contract on the spot. So me and a couple of my teammates, we had driven I'm from Philadelphia, PA. I live in Miami now, but I'm from Philadelphia. This event was in Orlando, Florida. So geographically, that's about a 15-hour drive.
Wow.
We drove from Philly to Orlando. And on Sunday afternoon, when the camp ended, we hopped back in our rental car and we had to drive back to Philly because I had to be at work Monday morning because I was working at a gym. Yeah, I was working at a fitness gym selling memberships at the time. This is the summer of 2005. So I had to be back at work because, again, I didn't get signed to a contract on the spot. Got back home to Philadelphia, back at my job, and I started cold calling basketball agents because at this time I had not even spent that much time out of the state, let alone out of the country. So I didn't know anybody overseas. I knew I wanted to play overseas, but I didn't know anybody. So I figured an agent who works the same in the literary world or the entertainment world, the same they do in basketball. They're basically the go-between between the jobs and the performers.
Yep.
So I figured if I get with an agent would know people who I don't know. So I started cold calling basketball agents. So if I just Googled basketball agents, and if I saw a phone number, I would call them and just say, hey, here's who I am. Here's what I got. I called 60 basketball agents that summer, Damian. And one of those agents, 20 of them said, let me see what you got. Yeah. And so I had to send them my footage from this exposure camp. Now, mind you, this is 2005. There's no website where you can put a link. So I'm sending them copies of a VHS tape. You remember those VHS?
Oh, yeah. I think I got a head start on you on age-wise.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm sending copies of a VHS tape in the physical mail to these basketball agents who said they're interested in seeing what I can do.
Wow.
So after I sent 20 copies of that VHS tape to these agents, one agent followed up or responded when I followed up and said, hey, I'll represent you. He became my first agent, and he's the one who got me my first contract. And most of my career was played in Europe. So my first contract was in Kaunas, Lithuania. That was in late summer 2005. So that's how my career began.
Wow.
Now that footage now was on a VHS tape. Now, if you remember, everybody who remembers VHS and those millennials, I don't know if you have many millennials listen to the show, they don't know what it is. Ask your parents or your grandma, or you can Google it. Then you can see what a VHS tape is. A physical device with footage on it. So it's like YouTube, but you got to hold it in your hand. So I knew that if you get that thing wet and leave it in the sun, anything happens to it, you lose your footage. But that footage was very important to me because that was my whole career was on that tape. So I heard about this new site that said you can put as much footage up on this site as you want for free.
Oh, wow.
And it was called youtube.com.
Wow.
Right. So that's how I took the footage from the VHS tape. I went to an audio visual store. They took the footage off the VHS and they put it onto a data CD. Yeah. And I put that CD in my parents' desktop computer and I uploaded it to YouTube. That's how I got on the internet. So that's how I started. Okay. That's when my brand began, when I put that basketball footage on YouTube.
Wow. That's phenomenal. That's brilliant. I love the tenacity and drive you showed to just force your career to start. I interviewed Brian Hennessy, an American football player, and he's got a couple of inventions. He's also a scientist, but he did the same thing. He literally camped outside, and I saw the footage on the news, Dre, outside one of the coach's offices, and the coach finally said, okay, well, I'll look at your footage. So I think self-driven people like you, Dre, you force luck. You know, people say you're lucky, but you force your luck. You make your luck. So that's phenomenal. So how long did you play professional basketball for?
9 years. So I started in 2005 and that went to 2015, but it was all told about 9 years.
Wow. And you started in Lithuania. I remember Lithuania playing New Zealand in international games. Did you play for different countries, different clubs?
Yeah, I played in 8 different countries. So every year I was in a different country. I never played in the same place twice.
So from going from not leaving the state really to traveling the world, 8 different countries, 8 years with professional basketball,
I'm guessing you said rental car, you said Philadelphia. You're not
Yeah.
from the most suit-wearing affluent background. What was that like? How did you deal with that identity change and culture change?
You mean playing basketball?
Yeah, just and having the money and being in a different country. It's a big
Uh,
shock.
Yeah, well, that was actually easy because I was already mentally prepared. I knew I wanted to do it. So it's not like it was a surprise when it happened. I was just waiting for it to happen. It doesn't matter when is it going to happen. But it's playing basketball, which is a universal language. Many places I played, the coaches didn't even speak English. A
Wow.
couple places I played, I had American. There were a couple places, like in Germany, for example, my coach was a black guy from Texas. He just happened to be in Germany. He used to play, then he became a coach. So he just stayed in Germany.
Yep.
And then there were other places where, like in Mexico, for example, most of the people spoke English, but in Lithuania, the coach did not speak English. Most of my teammates didn't speak English. So my agent would have to come to every practice. And if the coach had something to say to me, he would say it to the agent would say it to me. And that's how we communicated the whole season. So that part it was a challenge, but overall it's basketball. And many times, Damien, I just had to remind myself. I just would catch myself in the middle of the day, like, man, you're in X country, whatever.
Yeah.
All because of basketball. I wasn't there on a family vacation. I was there because of basketball. So even the times when the basketball situation wasn't going so great, I had to remind myself, you're living a life that everybody back home wishes they could live. You're doing something that they'll never get a chance to do. So it was a great experience. It's the best job you could possibly have. It's much easier than being an entrepreneur.
Now that sort of does tangent a little bit because you alluded to, well, I was already prepared for that. You didn't say the word success, but that's what you had. You already prepared yourself for it. So that's telling me you had a different mindset. And yeah, you talked about being an entrepreneur just then because you shifted after 9 years. What happened for you to start suddenly be doing 4 TED Talks? What happened to being such an entrepreneur? How did that sort of evolve?
Great question. So remember that I came out of a Division III college. So the way that the sports world works is every industry is somewhat political, some more than others. And the sports world is political in such a way that when teams are evaluating a player and deciding whether to give you a job or not, they're looking at your background. They're looking at where'd you come from. They're looking at your pedigree. So since I came from a Division III college, every time one contract ended, I had to go right back into selling and marketing mode to get my next contract.
Right.
And mind you, I'm competing against, they're not looking at they're not looking at the available players and saying who's the best player coming from a Division III. They're saying who's the best player, period. Right. Yeah. So I'm competing against guys who came out of Division I schools.
Yeah.
So there were times, Damien, when I wanted a contract, but I could not get one. So there are times where I was just unemployed as a basketball player.
Yeah.
So I'm going to the gym, working out every day, waiting for the phone to ring. So to give you two answers at the same time here, one that you asked and one that you didn't. One is that I was able to accumulate so much content on the internet because of the times that I did not have a contract. So I'm going to the gym every day, recording videos.
Wow.
And I'm putting them on YouTube.
Yep.
Now, then at the same time, to answer your other question, is going back in the story. So back in college, I got introduced to, I didn't know what it was at the time, but it was network marketing. All right. So a guy invites me to a meeting. I go to a hotel meeting. And I didn't stay in network marketing, but I'm glad that I went to a couple of those meetings because at the meetings, these guys would always say, hey, make sure you plug into the personal development. They would always say that personal development. And I'm like, what is that? I've never heard that phrase before.
Yeah.
Now, I'd always been into reading books. My mom's a teacher, so she had me reading and writing from a very young age. But then when I started looking into it, I noticed they were name dropping these guys I never heard of. They were name dropping Tony Robbins, Jim Rohn, Napoleon Hill, Brian Tracy, Zig Ziglar. I'm like, who are these guys?
Yeah.
So I went and looked up these books. I go on eBay because I couldn't even afford to buy the full book. So I go on eBay and buy like the pirated version of the book, Microsoft Word, for 99 cents. And I read Think and Grow Rich by Robert Kiyosaki. And I read, Think and Grow Rich was Napoleon Hill, and Rich Dad Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki.
Yep.
And I remember reading Rich Dad Poor Dad, and I thought to myself, okay, so this is what all the other adults out there are doing that the adults around me are not doing. All right, they're doing something different because he was just talking about different principles and making money. And I kept that in mind. Now I said, when I get done playing basketball, I'm going to do whatever he's talking about. I couldn't quite explain it back then, but I knew he was talking about something different than the adults around me, because adults around me were full-time employees. And there's nothing wrong with having a job. Basketball's a job. Yeah. But they talked about their jobs like It was a necessary evil. They were always at work. They didn't talk about it like they got to go to work. They had to go to work, and they didn't like their coworkers, and they never had any money. So I'm like, all right, whatever they're doing, I don't want to do that. Let me do what this guy's talking about. So I said, I'm going to do basketball first. After college, then I'm going to do this stuff, whatever this stuff is. So 2009, I found myself unemployed. The phone's not ringing. My agent's telling me just stay in shape. When the phone call comes in, because when you play professional sports, that call comes, you had to be ready to play like 2 days later, right?
Wow.
It's immediate, right? So you had to stay ready, even though you don't know when the phone's coming in. So that requires a lot of discipline, a lot of mental toughness.
Yeah.
So I'm unemployed. And I asked myself the question at that time, I said, how can I combine basketball with making money with being in control? Because when you're a pro athlete, you are not in control. The team and the league is in control, because if they don't hire you, you don't have a job. Now, at this time, this is about 2009. So I just finished reading another book. So I'm a big reader. I just finished reading kind of like the digital age concept of Rich Dad, Poor Dad, but it was for the digital world. And it was a book called The 4-Hour Work Week by Tim Ferriss.
Tim Ferriss. Yeah, he was great. Really interesting principles that he has.
Yes, exactly. And he was basically, to me, he was taking a lot of the principles that Robert Kiyosaki had talked about, but he had translated them for the digital world, because a lot of his stuff was about how to use the internet to do other things besides the traditional work thing. Because Tim Ferriss, a lot of people don't notice, he was a full-time entrepreneur running his own business, but the business was running him into the ground. He was almost exhausted. That's why he wrote the book, because he had to figure out, how can I run a business without killing myself? Because he was exhausted. That's what was happening. His girlfriend left him, and he was just crashing. That's why he wrote that book. A lot of people don't know that. So I had read that book, and I said, all right, these are kind of digital age principles. So I combined Kiyosaki stuff with Tim Ferriss stuff. I asked myself that great question: how do I combine three things? Basketball, make money, and control. 1, 2, 3. And that's when I started doing what we now call building a personal brand. That wasn't a phrase back then, right?
It's so rare. It's not only a phrase, but not really a thing, Dre.
Exactly. Nobody had it. They called it that later when people saw it. They said, oh, Dre, you got a personal brand. But at the time, it wasn't a personal brand. It was just, you're a guy putting content on the internet. What does that even mean? Right? It wasn't a thing. Back then, in 2008, if you're a full-time blogger, you're a bum living in your mom's basement who needs to get a real job, right? That was the way people looked at you. So at that time, again, because I was reading Tim's stuff, he floated some ideas of, hey, here's how you can even create a product and sell it on the internet. And I said, if I could sell a product on the internet, listen, I don't even need to get another contract from basketball. So I made my first product. It was a program to teach basketball players how to dribble the basketball, because a lot of players, that's what they want to know, how to dribble the ball. Program was $4.99 US dollars. Okay. I put that program, I made the program, it was just a PDF, about a 5-page PDF using videos that I already had on YouTube. So I didn't even create anything new, just PDF. I made a little 2-minute video, put it on YouTube and say, hey, everybody, I had this new program. Go to this website, buy the program. This is a 1-page website. This is not some elaborate thing. All right. I'm not a graphic designer by trade. I'm not. 1-page website, HTML website, free hosting platform, cost me no money. I put the program up, I went to sleep. The next morning I woke up and had an email. It said, congratulations, you made a sale, $4.99.
Yes.
And I remember when I made that first sale, Damien, I said to myself, this is what I'm going to be doing for the rest of my life. I said, basketball, hopefully the phone rings again and I'll keep playing. And it did ring and I did keep playing. Yeah. But I knew that eventually basketball runs out. They say sports are a young man's game for a reason, because eventually the body can't do the same things, but the mind gets better as you get older. The body, eventually it goes up, then it goes down, right? So I knew I wouldn't always be able to jump 40 inches in the air, but I could take an idea out of my head, translate it from an idea into a real thing, tell somebody that I have it, put a price tag on it, and they will give me money for it. We now call that intellectual property. It was another phrase I wasn't familiar with back then. I said, I can do this forever. I got plenty of ideas. I can make programs and turn into money forever. If I can learn, there's a whole industry to doing this. That's what I realized, that there's people who do this full time. That's all they do. Yep. So I said, let me do that. So as I said, the phone did ring again. I kept playing basketball till 2015. But between 2009 and 2015, Damien, to answer the rest of your question here, the transition for me from sports to business, I kind of, that was a smoother transition for me than most athletes, because of the fact that I started doing it 5 years before I even stopped playing, because I sold that first program in 2009. So then I just made more programs. So during that last 6 years of my career, I'm building my brand on the internet,
Yep.
putting content out, building an audience, selling programs, writing books. I was doing all of that stuff while still playing professional basketball. So I kind of had two careers going at the same time. So in 2015, when I stopped playing, it wasn't a tough decision for me because I already knew what the next thing was I was going to do. Like the very next day, I'm full-time being an entrepreneur. I didn't have to figure out what to do.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It really still surprises me. I've got such diverse guests. Yesterday, I was talking to one of the Delta Force guys that captured Saddam Hussein, and I'm talking to Dre, a professional basketball player and entrepreneur. But you both say the same thing in the transition, and I really do liken sports people, and that's incorrect, no, not liken. I know that sports people's transitions is probably harder than a veteran, Dre, mentally. But the veterans that have been so successful, they start their transition 2 to 5 years out. And if they're lucky, they get paid by the military to do that. He was lucky he got put into a different role and he learnt a new skill. You made your luck, which is probably going to be the title of the show. You made your luck by already starting that skill. So it was not only a smooth transition, it was a natural and organic transition, which is awesome to see.
Yeah, thank you.
Let me see. $4.99 promoted on a YouTube video. My question, thinking about the audience's questions, was you made the PDF. Awesome. How did you promote that? I mean, the internet now, people think they build a website and everybody comes. All they've done is build a store. How did you get people to look at your PDF? How did you market that?
Good question. So I start putting out content. Mind you, I put that program out in 2009.
Yep.
I've been putting out content for free since 2005.
Right.
I never made an offer to my audience till 2009. So for 4 years, I had built up goodwill. I built up an audience. I built up my name. I built my reputation, and I established who I was and what I was about. So my name started to spread through word of mouth. Most of my audience was built through word of mouth for that first 4 years. And it was all 13 to 24-year-old basketball players who were trying to get better. That's all it was. I knew exactly who I was serving. All I was doing was teaching kids the stuff that I wish somebody had taught me 10 years earlier. That's all I was doing. Just basically scratching the itch of 10 years ago me. So that I knew exactly what that audience needed. I knew exactly what they needed. I knew what they needed mentally. I knew what they needed physically. I knew what challenges they were going to face. Everything they were about to go through, I'd already done. And they could definitely relate to me because here I am playing pro ball. I only played 1 year high school. I walked on to play in college. So these players they could admire a LeBron or a Steph Curry, but they can't relate to them because they are not stars like LeBron and Steph Curry are, right? Yeah. For every one LeBron, you got 1,000 Dre Baldwins. So they could relate to me, right? Yeah. So I had already built up all of this goodwill and audience. So by the time I launched my product and told them I have a product to sell, and mind you, the idea for the program wasn't just something I randomly came up with. This was from the commentators on my videos because somebody said to me, Dre, why don't you just write down what you do for your workouts and put it out so then all of us can work out how you work out. And I said, okay, I'll do that, but I'm going to charge for it. Well, you pay for it. And they said, yeah, as long as it doesn't cost too much. And this is what the commentators are saying. And I knew who my audience was. I know these are kids living at home with their parents. They're high schoolers, so they don't have a lot of money. Right. So I had to charge something that is small enough that it's a decision that they can make on their own. And there's enough money that they can pay it. Yeah. They don't have to bring their mom or dad into the situation. So $4.99 seems simple enough. And we just sold those things in volume. We sold thousands of those programs over the years. Wow. And all I did was put out a YouTube video and say, hey, here, I got this program. Then when I put the next one out, I got a new one. And then every video, because every video I put out at that time was just me on the court doing a move or a drill and just explaining it. And then at the end of the video, I would just say, hey, if you want a full program on how to do more moves like this, go to xyz.com and get the program. And that's all I did. And then I got probably to this day, 7,000 basketball videos on YouTube. So that was my marketing strategy.
Wow, that's brilliant. And it works. I've seen it multiple times with military and tactical sort of guys as well. Some guests I was lucky enough to have on the show last year, GBRS group did the same thing. They were just putting out, their SEAL Team 6 guys are putting out content that people just love to watch. And then the one time they'd invented something that they needed, then everybody else wanted it, and it sold like that. Yeah, that's a brilliant organic way to do it, and it's so authentic as well, Dre. So TED Talk, that's almost the pinnacle of someone's journey. How did that come about? Because that's a big deal.
Another good question. So this was me just paying attention. So I was listening to a podcast, and there was a guy on there named Derek Sivers. He's an author, and I think he lives in New Zealand, as a matter of fact. And he's an American guy, but he lives in New Zealand, I think, today.
Yeah.
And he was a speaker. He was a experienced speaker, and I just like his stuff. I liked his writing and all of that. But at the end of his interview, he just said, "Hey," because the interviewer asked him, "How can people reach you?" He said, "I read all my emails. I get a lot of them, but I actually take time to read all my emails." So he said, "Send me an email. You got a question or a comment, just send me an email. I get thousands, but I take my time. I do eventually get to you. I will write you back."
Wow.
So I wrote him. Let's see if he writes me back. And he did write me back. And I said to him, "Hey, I'm a big fan of your work. I've read this, I read that." And I was being genuine because I really was a fan of his stuff. And I asked him a question. I said, I'm an athlete. I'm transitioning into getting out of sports into business. I want to get into professional speaking. How do you think I can start? And he said, "Well, you should look up TED Talks. Just go to this website and look up your location where you live, and you'll probably see some events happening in your area. Go to their websites, you apply, and you get chosen. You can give a TED Talk." I said, "All right, I'll do that. I know how to sell myself. I'd already proven that." So I went and looked up talks in my area. Like you said, I found a couple that were happening in South Florida where I live. And my first two TED Talks were in South Florida. I just went and applied. And all you do is, to land the TED Talk, a lot of people don't know this as well. So I think I should share this, Damien. To get on the stage, to get on the TED stage and stand on that red circle, that carpet, you have to be able to sell yourself in writing. That's the most important thing, because what they do is they put out an application page.
Yeah.
And they ask you, who are you? What's the big idea of your talk, which usually becomes like the title of your talk? Why does that idea matter? Why are you qualified to talk about it? Give us a brief overview of what you're going to say.
Yeah.
And nowadays they usually ask for some kind of video sample just so they can see that you know how to deliver to an audience.
Yeah.
Right. And then they might get 60 applications and they only pick like 10 people. So you have to be able to sell yourself in written format. I always tell people in my audience, communication skills are paramount. If you cannot communicate, you can't get on in life, whether it's the spoken word, the written word, one-to-one or one-to-many. You have to be able to communicate. And I've always had that ability because, as I told you, my mother's a educator. So I was always a big reader, always a big writer. Yep. So my communication skill is the reason I played pro sports. Yes, I had talent, but it was my communication skill because that's how I sold myself.
Exactly.
And to get on the TED stage, it was my ability to sell myself. So all of my TED Talks, none of them were incoming inquiries. They were all me going to them and pitching myself. And yep. I pitched myself for something that I didn't get chosen for. Yep. But the ones that I did get chosen for, I got on the stage.
Congratulations. It's really refreshing hearing firsthand the stories that you're saying of you put yourself out there and you get the result. And, you know, people like, you were talking about the people you admired from books, you know, like Tony Robbins, Kiyosaki. I followed a guy, John Kehoe. He wrote a book called Mind Power. Same thing many years ago. And they all have fallen on their face many times. It's not they're all perfect. They get it right the first time. And it's about tenacity and perseverance. And then once you've got that, keep pushing it. And you're doing the same thing, you know, from that first time of approaching 60 agents, which I must ask, as soon as you said it, I had a vision of Tom Cruise in my head. What was your agent like?
My first agent, he was a former, actually, me and him never actually met in person. Everything was through the phone and the internet. Yeah. So he was a lawyer who was deciding to get into the basketball world.
Yeah.
And I was one of his first wave of clients. That year was his first wave of basketball clients. And by the end of that season, believe it or not, he decided to leave the basketball world because he felt it was so shady and nasty. He went back to being a full-time lawyer. So he got out of basketball.
Wow.
Because he didn't like the way it was. The professional basketball world is kind of shady, especially overseas.
Wow. Yeah. You just wouldn't pick it, unless you have been in that world.
Right.
So TED Talks, you're selling yourself and writing to those guys. Did you do the TED Talks before you started being an author, or is that around the same time? Was there some crossover?
It was in the middle. So I started writing books in 2010. I did my TED Talks in my first one was 2015.
And let's just talk through your books. Is there a general tone? What was the first book you wrote, and what are you an author of?
Sure. So my first book was called Buy a Game, and that's the only I got 33 books to this day. That's the only one that's just a story. That's the only one that's me just telling a story. It's just a narrative. And that was written specifically for my audience of basketball players. And it was just me telling my story from when I first started playing ball up through my college years, just telling them the story. And that's because I had just heard of this concept of self-publishing, that you didn't have to wait for someone to okay you to write a book. You write your own book. And I wrote that. I just made it as I wrote it in like Microsoft Word or Google Docs, whatever it was. Got it into a PDF, and I just put it out for free for people to download.
Wow.
So that was the first book. And then after that, I started putting the books up on like Amazon, Kindle Direct Publishing. And those next wave of books were about mindset. So discipline, confidence, mental toughness, personal initiative. Then I wrote a book about a blueprint to how to play basketball overseas, a guidebook for that. I've written 4 books about how to play basketball overseas. Then all the rest of the books were more on the mindset or business side. So most of my books have a mindset tone, or a mindset and how it relates to business tone.
Now, on that note, what is your point of difference, Dre? Because here's my morning coffee. Thank you. Need that.
What time is it there?
Look, we started at 5:30 a.m.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, what time is it there?
Riser as well. It's 5 o'clock p.m.
Oh, well, it'll be family time for you soon, so I appreciate you taking the time. Yeah. So speaking about the mindset books, there's so many out there now. Back in the day when I started with Tony Robbins and John Keogh, and also you might know this one, Way of the Peaceful Warrior by Dan Millman.
I've heard of it, yes.
There was not so many. What's your point of difference for as a mindset author and I guess mindset coach almost?
Mm-hmm. The point of difference for me? The biggest thing that I see is everybody talks about mindset on some level. No matter what you talk about, everything has some element of mindset to it. No matter what you're teaching, it's the connection that the consumer has with the person. It's a story. The story of the person is their background and where they come from and why they're talking about what they're talking about. The why matters. That narrative matters a lot. So the reason why my audience was my audience when I first started is because of the story. Is that this guy only played 1 year high school. He walked on in college and he still, quote unquote, made it in basketball. I like this guy. I'm connected to this guy because a lot of players saw themselves in me. Yeah. And then these days, none of my clients are basketball players, right? They might like basketball, but they're not basketball players. But they connect to the fact that, first of all, they understand I'm a person who I wasn't handed anything. I had to go get it. I had to go earn it. And I have those values of having to go earn something, and also have people understand that I'm willing to talk about things that a lot of people know they can't talk about at their jobs, but I can talk about on my platforms. Yep. And I'll talk about them in a real and direct way. And people in my audience tell me that, like, I like the fact that you talk about stuff that, given my line of work, I can't say that, but you can say it. I like the fact that you say it and you keep it real and you're honest about things. Those are the things that make people connect with me, even though that's not what they come to me for, right? But it's the fact that we're on the same wavelength. That's what makes people connect. So when you're in a space where you're not the only person talking about topic XYZ, it's how you talk about it and why you talk about it that is what makes people connect with you. That's 100% the case. And the thing is, a consumer can connect with more than one person, but they connect with you for a reason, not just for the material.
Interesting, because it really comes back to how we started this conversation. You dropping a personal video to me that immediately I felt there was a connection there. I wanted to share that with my family and speak highly of you. And it's in my intro, I said the same thing in this digital world, in this internet world of anonymity. It's going to stand out. So yeah, you've obviously nailed it. That's such a big thing, and also such an obvious thing that entrepreneurs or salespeople clearly miss out on. maybe because they're focusing on the product or focusing on other things, but that connection and the authenticity is so important.
Yeah, 100%. And authenticity, I tell people in my audience that the number one key to building a personal brand is personality. And you got to actually have one. You got to have a personality, and people want that authenticity these days because it's so easy for anybody to present themselves as anything on the internet these days.
Wow.
You never know who you're really talking to.
Wow.
Right?
Yeah.
So that authenticity, when people believe you, it doesn't even matter what you're talking about. It's just, do people believe that you believe what you're saying?
Yeah.
When they believe that you believe it, that's when they can connect with you if whatever you're talking about happens to catch their attention. But that matters a ton. That authenticity is big. You can't lose that. That's your reputation.
So where did this all start, Dre? I mean, we've painted the picture from 2005 to now, the sort of journey of the progressions, but where did this drive inside you start to have that personality, to have that drive for self-improvement and so on? It's rare, and that's why those people make books, because there's not many people in the world that can do that and show it. What started you off?
That's a great question. It comes from just, first of all, I'm a competitor. I'm an athlete, play sports, so I've always been competitive in playing sports. Also, being a reader as I am, I've always been into growth. Always been into growth and development. Didn't even know it was called personal development until I was almost 21 years of age. Yep. They used to call it human psychology. That's what the section in the bookstore used to be called. Now they have personal development section. Yep. But I was always into how the mind works and how people think, why they think that way, and how their thoughts lead to their actions. I was always into that. That always just caught my ear and eye. And then when I started to notice that there are people who actually studied this stuff and wrote about it. So when I saw Think and Grow Rich, I said, oh, wait a minute, that's a process. You can think one way and then something's going to happen. I said, that's interesting. And then when I saw Robert Greene, 48 Laws of Power, my favorite book, that way that you think, and that book is all about the way you think and how it leads to the actions you take and how it can lead to a result. And that stuff has always been very, very interesting to me. So I think it's part of it is my wiring connected, combined with the fact that I'm an athlete and I had a way to express it physically, but also understood because I was big into books. At the same time, being an athlete, I had the cerebral part and the physical part together. So when I saw the book part and just being, intelligent enough to understand that you can't express everything physically, and you won't always be able to. But what can you do with your mind? And the mind is stronger than the body. So just understanding all those pieces together, I kind of put it all together. That's how we got here.
Man, the parallel between special forces and elite athletes is so close. And I interviewed a couple of All Blacks rugby players on this as well. And the All Blacks work with New Zealand SAS in different ways. One of my old bosses actually helped them out. And it's all down to mindset. I mean, to go through a selection process and for the people in the States and yourself, you're looking at the SEALs and Hell Week and so on. It's this, the body gets there and you've got to be fit and have some standards, but the mind will do so much further than the body. But one thing you sort of brought up to me there, Dre, was how your brain's wired. And it's the same thing for us. We have a tenet in New Zealand SAS, which is the unrelenting pursuit of excellence. We've got 3 others as well, but somebody that comes out of the unit must display that, and they're kind of selected for that. But it's just that high standard of personal discipline and always wanting to be better, always going a little further. And it's really interesting to hear you as a sports person talking about that, and then you as a person inside knowing that, hang on a sec, my body's going to last X amount of years. My mind's going to last a hell of a lot longer. How can I utilize that and express that in its best form as well?
Yeah, I mean, and at the same time, because of the fact that I was playing at the Division III level, which meant there was no guarantee I would even get a chance at the pros. And then every time I got a contract, there was no guarantee there'd be a next contract or a next one or a next one. So I always had in the back of my mind, well, look, this might be the last shot. So if this ends now, who are you when this is over? Who are you after this? And I tell people that had I played at some Division I college, like the University of Miami or Duke or something like that, North Carolina, and went straight into the pros, or say I went straight to the NBA and signed a 10-year guaranteed contract, we probably wouldn't be having this conversation right now, not from the same angle, right? Because I never would have started thinking about all the other stuff. I would have just played basketball and not thought about anything else, because the basketball situation was set and it was perfect and it was guaranteed. But because mine was anything but that, I had to be thinking about the other stuff. And because of the fact that I was thinking about it, that's how I was able to start kind of greasing the skids for it. So when I got done playing ball, I already went straight into it, hit the ground running. Yeah,
absolutely. The training you had from having to resell yourself every year must have been phenomenally made it such a difference in the next decade of your life. Just want to touch on the last thing that I've got here from your PA was great. You know, your framework is essentially the roadmap in reverse for professional mindset, strategy, systems, and execution. Now, I needed to speak to you and comprehend where you're at and what you do to understand that. And I'm suggesting what that means, the roadmap in reverse for professional mindset, strategy, systems, and execution, is just what you said, is let's get that information to someone now because you've been there and done it. Let's get ahead of it rather than letting them learn the lessons at 35, 40, 50 years old and so on. Would that be right?
Yeah, exactly. And that roadmap in reverse is actually one of my clients actually said that, and that's where I got that from. And I said, that's exactly kind of what I do. You figure out what someone wants to achieve, and then we basically break down what steps need to be taken and what questions need to be asked and answered in order to get there. One of the things that I find, one of the things I do now mostly is working with people as a coach, whether in group or one-on-one, is that most people I talk to have goals, but they are very unclear on what steps need to be taken in order to reach them. And they also are asking themselves very poor quality questions for reaching those goals. And when you ask yourself the wrong questions, it doesn't matter if you come up with the right answers because you're asking the wrong question, right? So you got to ask yourself the right questions. And that's one of the biggest things that I notice, like when I work with people, it's taking the things that they want to do and asking them questions that they have never even considered. That's the part that they value the most. It's not that I'm some genius that has all the information. A lot of people think that that's the key to coaching, is you have to be this wizard. No, it's, you just have to be able to ask better quality questions than the people you're helping. And that's something that I'm really good at, is deconstructing things and figuring out, well, what questions are not being asked here? What are we not addressing? What's being ignored here? What are we pretending not to see? Those are the things that I'm good at. And that's one of the key skills of being a good coach.
Wow. Yeah. I love coaching. I've coached clients for many years in the health and wellness space, but now I'm pushing on to actually using some of my special forces training and helping them in a different way. But I just love passing on the knowledge that you've learned and shortcutting there. I want them to learn from my mistakes, and I'll tell them my mistakes. Hey, I can see you're doing this. I used to do this, and then try and shortcut that as well. Look, it's going to be in the show notes, but where is the best place for people to find you? Just straight off website and maybe YouTube?
Oh yeah, my Instagram is Dre Baldwin. It's probably the place where I'm most active. My YouTube, you can just look up my name, Dre Baldwin. I'm on every social app. So every app I'm active, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn. I take my Instagram posts and put them on TikTok as well. So you can find them on there. And yeah, I'm on every website. So anywhere people will be looking for me, they can find me. We actually have a free training that I put out for people who are transitioning. Can I share that?
Absolutely. Dre, go for it.
Yeah, so anybody who's transitioning from one career to the next is just trying to figure out what's the smoothest way to get it done. I have a free training. It's about 40 minutes long. It's called, you just go to nextmission.app.
Wow.
Nextmission.app, not .com, but .app. And in that free training, I'll tell you the 5 keys that you're going to need to make a smooth transition without having to depend on, you don't have to worry about a government program or just trying to figure it out on your own and being all left to your own devices. I'll tell you exactly what keys you're going to need to do it. I
must say, and you know, I've seen your website. I did my research after we connected, and it was brilliant. But I must say, there's not many people in the world, if any, that would do what you just said, is help someone transition from one career to the next. I mean, I've talked about the military a little bit, and I interviewed a lot of those guys last year, really for the mental state. It wasn't, we don't share war stories. We've all been there and done that. So we talked about things that people didn't know about special forces guys, you know, the hard stuff we go through. And I was just saying this to Chris Van Sant yesterday. One of the Australian SAS guys, Dre, he said that transition was harder. It was the hardest thing he's ever done in his life, more than war. Transitioning from one career, which was in the military, to another was harder than battle. And most people don't realize that, but even the civilian world, when you said that, you know, I was thinking these civilians that, you know, back in my day, you had one career, but you transition from one career to the other. What about the businesswoman that's transitioning into now a mum? She's got 5 or 6 years, doesn't have her career in front of her. Or what about the mum whose boys and children are raised and now they're having to transition out? It's a big thing you're doing. I think it's a gap in the market.
Yeah, and I've talked to, every once in a while I have somebody who is coming from the military who finds me because they understand the concept of transitioning, and they see that they found out that I used to play ball, and they see what I'm doing now. They're like, wow, how'd you do it? You know, so it's something that caught my eye and ear, even though I haven't been, you know, in the military. But I think it is absolutely something that, especially these days, because people change careers so much faster now and so much more often. And people do it very quickly now, where back in the days, like you said, somebody gets one job and you stay there forever. It doesn't happen anymore.
Oh, look, I'm going to be looking at it. I'm excited. The whole community out here will love to see that. I'd like to finish, and I'm supposed to start the interview with this. And I'll forget every time, and B, I try and figure it out. But it's called a 2-word check-in. Now, I know I've got the accent, so it's not chicken, but it's a 2-word check-in with you, Dre, and it's 2 adjectives you'd use to describe your feelings of how you're doing now. So it's just checking in where you're at. Can I throw that at you, a 2-word check-in, and get some ideas of your headspace?
Good question. 2 adjectives. Enterprising and I'm just trying to think adjectives. I'm thinking of verbs, so I got to think of adjectives. What's a marketing word what's an adjective for marketing? That's the word that keeps coming to mind. That's really my focus for this year is marketing.
Oh, marketing. And that's a word I'm trying to get my head around. So I'm selling the How Not to Die course. I love teaching that stuff, but I don't understand marketing, advertising, selling. They all sort of a mishmash for me. I'm not a professional person in that space, but I would suggest advertising or showing and communicating are some words you could utilize there.
Yeah, communicating, I guess, is fine. That's not the best word,
right?
But I could explain that to you.
Really I'd love to hear.
If you like. Yeah. So the way I explain it to people, I give them the acronym of ICE. So it's the idea, the communication, and the exchange. Those are the 3 things. So the idea is you already have it, which is how not to die.
Yeah.
Right. I follow you on Instagram, so I see your post there. That's the idea. The communication is the marketing. So all marketing is the relationship that you have with your audience. That's marketing. So this show, for example, is marketing. You're deepening the communication with your audience, and new people are finding you every episode. That's marketing. And that's ongoing. That's something that you are continually doing. Idea, you may only need one idea. Like you can take one product and just sell it forever. Every time you come up with a new product, that's a new idea. But the marketing you continually do. So every email, every post, every episode, et cetera. And the exchange is you telling somebody, well, this course costs this much money. You give me the money, I give you the course. That's the sale. So selling is the exchange. Like the sale is not complete until an exchange happens. They give you something, you give them something. That's the exchange point. But the marketing is the communication. And that's the biggest part where a lot of people come up short, because they simply either don't know how to, they're not consistent enough with, or they're not direct enough with their communication and get their point across to the right people. So the idea, the communication, the exchange. So the marketing is just letting people know about it. And advertising is just one form of marketing. So advertising is where you pay to get attention.
Right.
Collaboration is where you utilize somebody else's audience. So right now, you and I are collaborating. So when I tell people I was on this show, some of my audience is going to listen. So now some of them become your fans, and some of your fans become my fans, and they can stay each other's fans. And then the third form of marketing is content. And it takes longer for that to convert, but the content has the longest tail because it will last forever. So somebody can find this interview 2 years from now.
Yeah.
It's not new to you, but it's new to them.
Yeah.
And that continues to build your audience. So those are the 3 different ways you can market yourself.
Wow. And again, you've demonstrated why I wanted to have you on the show, because you're so clear, concise, and it comes from, I guess, basketball and that logical progression you went of creating your mindset, succinct on the dark arts of marketing, the dark arts of entrepreneurship. It's brilliant. It's very attractive to see because it makes sense in my mind, and I'm sure it makes sense in the mind of a lot of the listeners as well.
Great. Well, thank you. I'm glad it's hopefully it's useful for you.
Oh man, it's cool. And I'm sorry to throw you under the bus with that. Those 2 things. It really makes that guest really think about things and gets a quick idea where they're into as well. But yeah, you are a very enterprising individual, Dre.
Thank you.
Hey, look, man, it's been an absolute pleasure speaking to you. A real breath of fresh air. I will put everything down there on the show notes for everybody, and of course I'll do it in the video intro. So thank you so much for your time. Thank you for what you do, and yeah, all the best for the start of 2023. It's going to be an enterprising year.
Absolutely. I appreciate you for sharing the platform with me, Damien. I'm looking forward to hearing the feedback from your audience.
Awesome. Nice one. I'll hit pause, we'll have a chat, and it'll be great.
All right.
Hi, I'm Damien Porter, former Special Forces operator, high performance living coach from hownottoDie.com.au. And you can listen to my Straight Talk Mind and Muscle podcast, sponsored by RealKetonesAustralia.com, the best and most effective ketone supplement on the market to reduce anxiety, enhance brain performance, and supply twice as much energy as glucose. Thanks for watching.